All right, everybody. Well, I'm excited to have join us tonight, Shawn Kerns. Shawn is a guy that we've connected here many years ago when he was at the Sixers, right?
Yeah, so I was selling season tickets. This was probably 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2008, 2009. So quite a few years ago. So, and that's the power of networking. So kind of keep in contact with people. If you're not on LinkedIn right now, that is the place that you kind of want to live and spend a little bit of your time these days. Especially if you're pursuing I mean, it's become more important, and you guys see it with kind of influencers, in whether it's a TikTok influencer or over to kind of LinkedIn. There are people that are transitioning out of kind of the sales, the realm of sales, working for corporations or small businesses, medium-sized businesses, whatever the case is, and they're making kind of the jump over into entrepreneurship or solopreneurship, where they are kind of started consulting their own consulting businesses based off of kind of how they've built this brand for themselves. Each one of you has an individual brand, and you want to amplify that. The best way to do it is obviously social media. You guys see it, you live in it each day. When I first started out in sales, LinkedIn was not a thing. So that's kind of lesson number one. Kind of one key takeaway is jump on LinkedIn if you're not already there. Start building your network. Like, your network is going to be the most important thing that you do. It's the most important part of kind of building a career, right? You have this network right now, but once you get into kind of the real world of your career, kind of those first couple of years, the more people you connect with within your industry, particularly if you plan on having any type of career in sports, is this part of the business school? Like, why did everybody choose to kind of be here today in this type of class? Anybody?
Sports marketing.
Okay. Okay, so this is a requirement for most or everybody? Okay.
It's a requirement, but I guess like kind of know like this is maybe like first spot in sports, like first position you might get, so might as well get the head start on it.
In sales.
Yeah.
Right. Anybody interning anywhere, whether locally or over the summer or anything?
And they have the Phillies.
At Philly?
Yeah. And I just applied for an inside sales job there too.
Cool, good stuff. So you're graduating in
Yep.
spring. Good stuff.
And then we got some folks working game days. So we got some folks working game days with the Flyers and Eagles and some other stuff here, right? So yeah, we got some folks involved here. They're getting
Okay.
involved in there.
Good stuff. Internships, to connect with everybody, make sure that you kind of cross-pollinate departments. If you're in ticketing right now, or if you're in corporate partnerships or marketing, or whether it could be like Aramark and you're helping out there on game nights or whatever it is, like, it's really important to just network and meet people in other departments, particularly if you can get any type of engagement with executives or any FaceTime there. That's super important. Go in early, stay late, just work your butt off. But let me take a step back. I'll jump back. So I started my career with an internship at Madison Square Garden. Quick story: I was working in the PR department. I would get in the office at like 7:30 every day. This is before like any type of PR technology existed. I would have to come in, cut the New York Times, the Daily News, all of the different print articles that related to the New York Knicks, and I would have to put them in kind of a binder and then deliver them to the executives throughout Madison Square Garden. So it wasn't just New York Knicks, so I had exposure to all these executives. Kind of fast forward 2 months into my internship, I met the VP of sales. We were the only two people there at like 7:45 every day. So naturally just struck up a conversation with him. Kind of fast forward towards the end of my internship, to your point about applying for jobs early. He actually offered me a job on the spot and said, hey, like you hustle like no other person I've ever seen in an internship, making $35 a day. He's like, I want to give you a job after you're graduated. So that was early on. So I graduate, take a sales job. He didn't tell me how much I was making. I started out $7 an hour plus commission. So that's the key. I'm like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to make a living? I'm living in Hoboken at the time. Like, this is expensive. We're right across the river from Manhattan. Hoboken at the time was just as expensive as Manhattan. And so had to hustle, sell as many tickets as possible. So early on, I started selling season tickets to folks like JP, right? People who were like single game buyers. And we go down the list. I'm like, I'm making 150, 200 phone calls a day. I'm like, this is like a waste of time. Like, you know, you can make a decent living, and you can sell 3 game packages, 5 game packages, 10 game packages, whatever. The you know the kind of the baseline stuff that you see on TV, and then I started to filter through the list. I'm like, okay, this person has like an email address at like an investment bank. This person works at NBC Universal. So I started to filter by corporations. Then
Sean, what were you selling? So you're working for the Garden, right?
I'm working at the Garden in PR.
No, what were you selling? Were you selling
So
Knicks?
season tickets for the New York Knicks, Ranger, and Liberty.
Okay.
So the Rangers were coming off of it. The NHL was coming off of a lockout or strike at the time. Rangers super popular. And a couple of really great players come in as free agents, but easy sale. Like that was kind of a one call close. Very similar to probably how the 76ers are today. Like it's pretty easy to sell a season ticket package to the Sixers, just because of how popular the team is, right? So I focused on the New York Knicks. Knicks were a good team, higher commission rates, and then I focused on the corporation. So I started to really kind of learn how to sell to businesses. Just it's perhaps one of the most valuable things you can learn is to pick up the phone and call and learn what's important to an executive. A lot of times season tickets, if you're selling them, there's a couple different avenues you can go within a department, but sales is typically where you would want to go. Like if I was selling season tickets today, I would be focused on businesses that have sales departments that are growing. There's a lot of different ways that you can figure out what type of sales organizations are growing. LinkedIn is a great one. But you really want to focus on businesses that have a strong outbound sales, because those are the folks who are going to be entertaining. That's what I do today. I do a lot of entertaining in my role today. So if the Sixers or the Eagles called me up today, I would probably be a good target for them, because of the amount of entertaining that I do of whether it's an executive over at Life Brand or Wells Fargo or wherever. Even you know, the university, like that. My software that I sell today is it's leaps and bounds a different type of sale than when I started out selling tickets. So I guess you may have talked about this. There's 3 important things to an executive. They care about time. How can we save time? How do we increase revenue for our organization? And then the third one is how can we mitigate risk? You guys probably have an idea if you read the paper, or any type of online news rather. Macroeconomic economic conditions are a little bit tough right now. A lot of companies are scared. So you can lean into like how can you mitigate risk? On sales messaging, it's really important. And for a sales team, any sales executive or director level who has buying power within an organization really wants to get that salespeople in front of people. It's one thing to make calls and have Zoom meetings It's fantastic. It allows you to scale, but being able to spend 2.5 to 3 hours of one-on-one time with a prospect is going to give you an advantage, which is where season tickets come in. That is how you'll sell a ticket. Over onto sponsorship. I'm working in the sponsorship space today, selling software to brand sponsors, so the Anheuser-Busch's, the PepsiCo's, and Gatorades of the world. But those brands, of course, want to amplify their image. They want to get their brand mark out there. They want that association with a property. If you look out in right field, the company Life Brand, they're based in, probably familiar with them, and when the home run gets hit in right field, you see the Life Brand sign. They're based in Westchester. They wanted to get their brand out there, so that's why they purchased that billboard in the outfield. They're paying a lot of money for it. They have the gate at Wells Fargo. They have a partnership with the Sixers, and I'm sure Flyers is on deck.
I think they have one with the Eagles too, right?
They do. They have one of the gates, and
I think they did a deal with the Patriots as well.
got the Patriots, the Atlanta Falcons,
What's that?
Petco Park.
They have one. Do they? Really?
Yeah, so they're targeting universities are very important for them, because you all use social media, and I think their tool is really useful. If you have any kind of anything on your social, it helps you kind of scrub it out, and we'll bring up a red flag on. If there's anything that may warrant you deleting it before you kind of jump into an interview process or something. It's just valuable from that standpoint.
Yeah, I forget which former athletes there's a couple former athletes that are involved in Life Brand now, right?
Yes, yeah, they have there's a PGA Tour golfer who's now kind of equity partner, I guess, and but that's kind of that's the new wave of sports sponsor. There's a lot of software companies that are just like Life Brand that are getting involved into the sponsorship space, because you kind of look back and take a step back 15 years ago, maybe longer, Anheuser-Busch kind of built their brand on of course, sports is drinking, right? It's Thursday night football, you'll probably have a drink if you're 21. So yeah, so they built their brand, like they literally they've got this equity within markets. Like if you were to go up to kind of New York versus kind of Detroit is heavy with Labatt. It's a sponsor out there. So people who live in Detroit typically are going to drink Labatt. If you're in an Eagles game, Miller Lite is kind of on tap, like Miller Lite and Miller Busch products or whatever it is these days. So yeah, that's kind of the sponsorship tech space. There are a couple different avenues you're going to be able to take if you want to stay in sports. Like everybody wants to work on a team. I worked for Madison Square Garden. I worked for the Sixers. I worked for a small ticketing company, kind of ticketing tech on the secondary market side, working on analytics behind the scenes of when you go on a StubHub or Vivid or even over to a Ticketmaster on the dynamic pricing element of a game. So I worked on that for like 6 years, and then I got into the sponsorship tech after kind of things with COVID settled down. I would say like the one thing back to what I originally talked about was the networking piece. My first boss, he now works at the NFL at a very high executive level. He reports right to Roger Goodell. And now we are, I'm kind of in talks with them on a greater partnership between my company and the NFL because of that relationship. I interned 2005, so I've known him since 2005. That is kind of the power of network. Keep in contact with people over the course of your career. If there's one thing that you take away from today, You may walk away and say this guy's full of crap. But that is the most important thing here today. So what do we want to talk about? What else?
Well, I always tell, I mean, I tell the students all the time, and sports is a small fraternity. And in Philadelphia, it's even smaller,
Oh, for sure.
right? So
For
like,
sure.
so, sports in general, because of the nature of it, people are always, you're connected in and people are moving from team to team or sport to sport or league to league. And so they could be moving from city to city, but in Philadelphia, from a cultural standpoint, we tend to stay, if you're a Philadelphian, you tend to stay in Philadelphia. And everybody, like, once you're in the network, you're sort of in the net, and it's, so you're absolutely right. The importance of networking, but also the importance of building relationships and the importance of, if things don't work out, you try not to burn bridges, you try to stay, you know what I mean? Because you just never know where, just because one opportunity didn't work out, doesn't mean that there won't be another opportunity in the future that may be where you're crossing paths again.
Yeah, and that is, it's so important to stay in contact with people. Like, there's going to be some people that you just don't kind of get along with, and I would like, you don't stay in contact with people. So they're a jerk, they're a jerk, but you're better off not being associated with them. But your career is long. I feel like I was sitting in your seat not that long ago, but here we are. I don't know how many ever years later. I graduated in 2006, so here I am. And it's just been an interesting ride. I feel like I'm still just getting going, but back to like a focus. Like you probably all have an idea of where you want to work. Sports is a lot more than just teams these days. Like, there are sports tech companies like mine that are specializing in sponsorship, capture, analyzing, and reporting on the value of the sponsorship when it shows up on social media, or whether it shows up on TV or a Sports Center highlight. This is a big emerging market because it's a lot different than the way it used to be. When I was interning, or when I was I guess early on in my career at Madison Square Garden or even the Sixers, helping figure out how much screen time Toyota was getting because they were a customer, or an agency has people doing it, right? And anytime you have a human element involved with that, there can be a lot of errors. It's not as accurate. But now this is an emerging market that started 5 years ago, and we're completely changing the way that teams are kind of doing business, because we've been able to actually capture all of that value and then equate it to media value. One of the things that marketing folks often have a hard time explaining to the other market creative, right? Everybody does great work in marketing. We love our marketers, but they have a hard time talking financials to a business. And your CEO, your CFO, your CRO, they only care about those three things, right? Driving revenue, mitigating risks, saving time. If you can accomplish all three of those with a product that you're selling, you're winning. And that's kind of where we're coming into the space. Any of this sports tech is accomplishing at least one of those things, if not three. So this market, like the sports technology market's kind of flipping things and helping teams drive more revenue, but also making brands smarter, like a company like Life Brand. They don't have anywhere near the marketing budget that an Anheuser-Busch does, but what they do have is data. And because they work with companies like mine that help arm them and put them in a position to understand how much value that they're generating.
So Shawn, maybe, because I know your background a little bit, so you've got experience in ticket sales, and then you also have this experience in sponsorship sales, right?
Yeah, so
what's the biggest what's the biggest difference like between the two types of selling? Because this course really talks a lot about sales and sales in general, but the differences between ticketing and sponsorships?
So ticketing, I think that like a lot of it does lend itself to that B2C, so that's selling to a consumer, right? And that involves a lot of upsell and it involves a large staff. Particularly if you're in if you're in a market that is not performing, like when I started, like when that whole transition from Comcast over to Harris Blitzer at the Sixers happened. You're all very young, but that happened a couple years back. Like 11, 12. The staff, the way that Comcast ran it versus the way that Harris Blitzer ran it was way different, right? They came in with a very professional focus. You would think that Comcast, but small line item, not much attention paid. So once Harris Blitzer came in, they brought in some real data-driven sales leadership, right? Scott O'Neill. If you're not connected with him on LinkedIn, connect with Scott. He is probably the best executive in sports. There's a lot to learn from him. So they brought in kind of a real focus. So a lot of folks like yourself would bring in kind of recent college grads. You'd be in the position for a year as a sales associate. So as I said, you're making 50 to 200 calls a day, whatever kind of that day-to-day quota is. To sell, right? And you're selling the holiday packages and the pending packages with the goal of eventually moving those up kind of upstream and building relationships with kind of the people who have buying power at companies, right? To upgrade them into a suite or into kind of some of the kind of more premier seating areas. So there's that portion. So ticketing is two different areas, right? You have premium and then you have your general bowl seating. The major difference, I think, is that B2B focus and it's the relationships. A lot of times, like I could call up a company and have a very short sales cycle with a kind of a business, right? Because a business can spend $10,000 like that, right? You get a budget very quickly for 2 season tickets at a time. Now sponsorship is kind of it could be a multi-year process. Anything in sponsorship, you're dealing directly with a corporation or a medium-sized business. There's something called multi-threading in sponsorship. You're dealing with 9 to 12 stakeholders, and you got to get that's called the buying center within an organization. And then the other part is back to ticketing. Like you might only be dealing with 2 people, right? You're dealing with a director of sales, maybe director of marketing, or some kind of that mid-level executive. They're going to make decisions pretty quickly because you have time on your side, right? With tickets, season starting in a couple of weeks, right? You want to get everything in. Sales, it's called a compelling event. Is that you want to, you always have time on your side until the season starts, right? You also have in tickets beachfront property, right? There's good seats. Those are easier to sell than the seats that are less desirable. Those are some of the main differences. But it really comes down to business versus consumer, B2C versus B2B. You can churn out a bunch of calls and turn a kind of that single game buyer into a season ticket type of package pretty easily. And it's the amount of it's just the amount of like outbound and output you're putting into that B2C portion, and knowing who the people are that are kind of that have intent to buy. Everybody who's ever come to a Sixers game has intent to buy at some point in the future, right? Can you call them up? Does kind of what, so there's something banned, you may cover this. The budget is like the first thing, and timing, right? Those are the 2 things that matter the most when it comes to season tickets with B2C, right? But the whole sponsorship side is it's much more complex. It is a longer sales cycle, as I mentioned, and it's just a different sale because there's just a lot more meetings involved with it. And really to find all the right people within an organization. So when you're working through an Anheuser-Busch, everybody is fairly siloed in a 115,000 person organization. You may have somebody in sports marketing like Lisa, who is running, and then you have Matt, then you have procurement, right? Procurement is ultimately going to deal with the kind of the business side. We'll work with them on pricing and timing and the budget. So that's going to be your key difference. You're just going to work your way within an organization, whereas sales is for tickets it's just it's simple. It's just a much simpler sale. Still very difficult. Don't get me wrong. Picking up the phone and making a sale and building a relationship where it did not once exist. It's the most valuable thing you can do in a business, in my opinion, because not everybody could do it. But I personally believe sellers are not born, sellers are made. If you consider yourself an introvert like me, this is pretty difficult for me. I don't like public speaking at all, which is why I'm here today. If I go into a room with 10 executives from Pepsi tomorrow and I'm prepared, I'm going to come across a lot different than I am in my day-to-day. I'm pretty reserved. I'm laid back, but overall I'm an introvert. Like I get my energy from relaxing throughout the course of a day. I've never been one to kind of engage somebody at the gym or whatever, or even if I was on set there or whatever when I was in college. But you know, I like to think that I turned myself into a salesperson over time. You know, I think that the foundational elements that you're learning here today certainly going to go a long way in either one of those if you choose to pursue a career in sports sales and ticketing versus sponsorship. They're both really rewarding. I would say naturally, if you had really good success selling in tickets, they are going to want to coach you internally and have you go start to sell sponsorships.
So how do you think that you became a good salesperson? What if you said you weren't a natural salesperson, which again, not many people are? How was it training? Was it just how did you overcome sort of some of your, you know, maybe if you say like, I just didn't want to be in sales, it's not my thing, but how did you start to get into a rhythm or really learn how to be a good salesperson?
It took a while. It probably took like 4 years. So I wasn't that good at Madison Square Garden. I made enough to be able to afford my apartment in Hoboken, but that was about it. And then, so the opportunity opened up at the Sixers, and my boss said, "Hey, you're Philly guys, as you just said, like if you're from Philly, you kind of want to be here." So I wanted to be here. Just a family. And then about 4 years in, I was put on a PIP, which in sales, you never want to be put on a PIP, performance improvement plan, which is basically you have 30 days or you're going to get fired. So that I had to really I had to take stock of like my life, and I'm like, I'm really shitty at sales. I had a bad attitude at the time. I had a really bad attitude. I thought I was a lot better than I was as far as selling. I wasn't like that humble. So I got put on the PIP, and then within like 3 weeks, I'd say, like I started to put in the work. Like we had a daily call that we had to hit. I get a number. I think it was like 65 calls a day. So I'm like 65, I can do that. I can do that before lunch. So then I started to make more calls. I started to kind of embrace the training because the company would invest in sales training. I would let's fast forward 6 months into the new season. I didn't get fired, by the way. The very next year, I was, I think, number 5 in the NBA. So I was out of 350, 400 sellers. I was number 5 in the entire NBA in sales. Following year, I was top 3. So
So what got you to that?
a combination of things, really reading. I read this book called The Challenger Sale. If you want to have a career in sales, buy the book. It's the best $12 you'll spend in your life. And that really explains that it's not about you. It's about these 3 things in an organization: making money, saving time, mitigating risk. If you can focus a sales process on those 3 things to an executive and explain them very simplistically in a way that your product fits in, kind of intertwined with that, it just becomes so much easier. Selling is not, it's not all that hard. It really boils down to rolling up your sleeves, outworking everybody, just hustling. And I know it could be a dirty word. You do not have to hustle on a day you wake up and you feel like crap. The world is heavy, right? It's pretty heavy, if you allow it today. But the days that you feel good, work your butt off, and you can make it in sales. And it's the mindset. The mindset is everything in sales. Becoming humble and then working my butt off are the only things that I changed. Following a little bit more of a strict process, but still keeping it conversational, knowing the process in and out, like backwards, left and right in my mind, but not being too rigid on a phone call to be like, do you ever watch a talk show and you're like, the person who's interviewing the guest is already on to the next thing. They don't give a shit what they're saying. That's how sales can often be, especially if you're reading off of a script. I got rid of that and then became a lot more conversational. As soon as you get more conversational with somebody and you put everything back onto them, and what I mean by that is really listening to what they're saying. And it's not so much using that against them, but it is capturing all these things that matter to a buyer, right? If your product or your service fits into that, there's a match. It's not like, hey, want to buy season tickets? Hey, we can do that. Like that's easy. But really understanding a business and like what drives them, you could call somebody up and like have this happen. We don't have a budget. Okay, that's fine. But then going other departments within a business and finding something that matters to them, and do you fit what they need to accomplish? That's the big change that has to happen in sales for you to be really good. I'm nowhere near there where I need to be in sales. I'm decent. But there are people that are outselling me within my organization that work on other lines of business. My title says sales director today. I work on a lot more than just selling for the organization because we're new to the sponsorship space, which is why my boss hired me, is to kind of build out the sponsorship product. But yeah, like if you really wanted to focus in on the selling and invest in yourself, whether that's books, if you learn by that, or if you want to watch anything on YouTube, like YouTube is, or start following sales influencers on LinkedIn and start really reading about that, whatever kind of new ways to email and new ways to prospect and outreach. That's where it's at. The prospecting and working hard that's the foundation of what you're going to do. I saw earlier, like on your slide, you had email, text, call.
Yeah, Well, we were just talking, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this too. We've talked a little bit about the importance of benefit selling. So selling benefits first, then the actual product, right? So, and I've been trying to tell them a little bit about how a salesperson can start with the benefits and then the other details sort of fall in line. Can you think of like any examples of that, maybe where you started to use that as a strategy as opposed to just saying, hey, I got season tickets and they're located in this location and here's what they, more about what's the result of buying the tickets? And that's sort of, the way that I've always sort of started conversations with, because I felt like that was a better way to get somebody to buy into something than the opposite.
Oh, for sure. So I would say like a good one is if I'm having a conversation with a sales leader at an organization and we're, through a discovery call, and we're just having kind of a conversation, we're chit-chatting about sales best practices and we get to talking and like how are you currently getting in front of your prospects and your customers? And they say, well, it's strictly Zoom right now. What's your win rate on Zoom? And they'll say 15, say 15%. I'll say, well, what about like going out to dinners? Like when your reps take people out to dinner, dinner's gonna last 2 hours and they'll say, oh, it's 50%. Say, okay. Well, a dinner and taking some of those sporting events, it's really hard to get people to come to dinner because it's not that compelling. But to get me to leave my kids, like tonight, I have soccer practice, right? Like to get me to leave soccer practice or to get me to leave from doing something like this to go to a dinner. Right now, somebody's trying to sell me. Or if you called me up and said, hey, the Sixers are playing next Tuesday. That's compelling to me, right? Or the Eagles game on Sunday, raining and sweet, and they're trying to sell me software or they're trying to sell me something that benefits me. That's it. That's the hook. Because it's 50%. You already told me, right? You just told me 50, you close at a 50% rate, right? You're spending a ton of time trying to get people on Zoom meeting, you close 15% of those, right? You start to look, okay, what's your average sale? So, oh, $50,000. Okay. Every time you get somebody out to a dinner, you close $25,000. But every time you get 15 people, you get 15 out of 100 on Zoom, and you have your reps are just spinning wheels. But now we've got 41 home games for the Sixers. What if, JP, I could get you and your best salespeople 4 tickets, right? What if I could get your 2 top sales reps out for 41 games throughout the Sixers season?
Yep.
It just and oh, by the way, you're only paying $40,000 for these 4 seats. So 2 games, you're going to pay for the tickets. Everything else is profit for the business because you're closing at a 50% rate, face to face. But it's really hard to get people to go to their dinner. And that's it. Like it's like that's the conversation. Selling that benefit. The benefit is the 3.5 hours of time. I once sold season tickets to a single game buyer. Believe it or not, woman, she was awesome. She owned like a Western Pest Solutions. If you guys know that, it's got like the bug spray people that come to your folks' place. She owned like a chain of that down the shore. Senior year of high school, it's her son's senior year of high school. She's like, we were just like talking, and she's like, my kid's he's going to senior. He doesn't want to do anything with me. We love the Sixers. She bought season tickets. They drove up from like down the shore every game that season because what did she value? $3.5, $10,000 or $12,000 or whatever it was. It didn't matter to her because when was she ever going to get that time? She's, you guys, if you're here on campus, if you're not with your parents, but I would say, right, like, my kids are 3 and 5, but if it really came down to like that, those dollars, their senior year of high school, like, you better believe, like, I'm buying the 3 season tickets, and if I have to ride them to bring one of their buddies or whatever, but those 3.5 hours, that car ride in, that matters. That's what season tickets is all about. It's about that quality time with family, friends, prospects. And that's always been the hook. And that is like the main feature. There's a bunch of other stuff, like there's the season ticket events and stuff, like if I was to like bring my kids to the Eagles and swoop and like that whole thing, that matters too. Like, I'll buy a suite for if Swoop was gonna come just to see my kids. And then be getting hugs from Swoop or Kintetiq or whatever. I don't know.
Let's why don't we open it up to some of the questions maybe from you guys? And then we can kind of just wrap it up a little bit. So anybody have any questions for Shawn?
I mean, I guess you kind of already touched on this, but like, what advice would you have for us that are graduating soon and like going into the sports field, whether it be a team or like an agency?
I would still like double down on the work hard, make yourself visible. You are young. That doesn't mean your age has nothing to do with your talent and your work ethic. Your talent, your skills are not going to increase, but you bring a vastly different skill set than even I do. You've got a different way of viewing the world than I do, probably, and that's extremely valuable. So understand that when you go into an agency or a team or wherever that you choose to go, you're a valuable member of the team. Your voice matters. Your skill set that you bring to the table matters. And if you just work your butt off, you're going to do great things at that organization. And if that organization is not the best fit or the greatest fit in the world for you, there's somebody else who deserves your talent, and you're going to go over there.
Anybody else?
It's kind of a personal question, but like, what was your favorite like sponsorship you ever won on?
I would say the first one was Breitling. It happened like by accident. I called David Goffberg to receive a billboards driving around. David was a single game buyer at the Sixers, and I always wanted to sell courtside seats. And this is crazy. I'm like, how does that work? Like, your name is up there with the watch company, and like, are you paying for the billboard, or like, how does that work? Like, no, there's a marketing budget that is for like out of home. It's like it's called like out of home advertising, right? Like, it's the billboards and all the stuff that you see. That's like these activations that are outside. Is that there's actually a budget for that. Like, how do we talk to these people? Like, how can we help them offset the cost of these tickets? Because they're $150,000 for, and that's a lot for a single, for a person to purchase. And he doesn't have the biggest book of business, right? As a local jeweler. So how do we get to those folks? And then he kind of brokered an introduction, and then I got the sponsorship. That's how I got in the sponsorship. So they were the official timekeeper of the Sixers. And then software is like the software sponsorship stuff that I've been selling, working through Gatorade and selling Gatorade. The entire NFL monitoring was probably the key win for me. That was coming off COVID. I was 3 months into my last company that I worked for. I was only there for 13 months, but I would say that as a close second. Cold call. That's it. Picking up the phone, like old school. Just pick up the call, build a relationship, and it didn't take long at all. Yeah.
So he's actually one of my dad's customers too.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad's.
Yeah. So, yeah, you know, like, that's,
Small.
yeah, very small world, yeah. Yeah. He introduced us to the right folks, and then that was it. So yeah, so you're very familiar with how the kind of co-marketing
Yeah.
budget works.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Any other questions, thoughts for Shawn? Okay. Shy now.
Does anybody, like, out of kind of whether it's an agency or a team or kind of some of these other adjacent kind of that's kind of living in the sports ecosystem, I guess technology, but is anybody like that set on, I really want to go work for this team or this league, or is there any feelings about that?
I'm actually in the process of interviewing for a group sales rep job at NASCAR.
Awesome.
Southern Region.
In North Carolina.
Daytona Beach.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. NASCAR is a great organization, and yeah, you'll have a lot of fun there. They're good folks. And it's a growing sport. You see more and more, like, they can take risks that other leagues can't take, and like they were really early to kind of the crypto sponsorships, and but group sales there is like you can make a name for yourself there for sure, and it's a lot of fun. It could be selling to like a lot of like churches and educational institutions and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and stuff like that, but group sales is awesome. You'll have a lot of fun with it. In days and stuff is cool. I always liked that. Anybody else?
I have pretty mentioned and they just like at the level stuff that they treat me so well. So it's like I kind of just want to be a part of it. So I know one of my favorite things. So
Yeah, a lot of people choose like this. Phillies and Eagles are like you can have a 30-year career there because they're so well run. Like they're run very well. I wish they sold more season tickets for sure. They need the help, I think. But I know it's a long season, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the Phillies, I mean, the Phillies culturally, you know, you have to go in through an internship program to even be considered usually for an entry level job. So, because I mean, it makes sense because they recognize that if you work for the Phillies, you're working arguably 81 home games, other concerts, other events. You could be doing 100 to 150 events a year. And that's time away from your family. That's nights. That's not just or nights and weekends. So you better like the people you work with. You better get along with it, and you better love baseball because you're going to be. Like for me, I never had to deal with that because I had opportunities to move into baseball. I just said, you know what? I don't know that I could do the games. It's just so much. So that's the fact that you're in there now. That is going to help you kind of get those opportunities because that's where they're not looking from outside, they're looking internally, and then they start to promote from within. They have a great culture. I really think the Phillies culture is great, and they definitely promote from within, and they have people there that have still to this day, which is usually unheard of, 30-year careers with one team.
Still there.
that's the Brian.
In the ticketing department.
He's the guy on probably put it into inside sales job.
Yeah. Awesome. You'll have fun.
I applied and in an interview for summer internship with the Knicks.
Nice. It's a good group there. They're keeping in contact with some folks there.
I have an internship with Fire Charities, last spring. And I've like always wanted to work for them just because like I've had season tickets since I was little and stuff, but when I was there, I saw some stuff that was scared me culturally wise. I've heard there's a lot of turnover in the organization. And people would really about the jobs for them. So like as an intern, I'm like,
Yeah, so I have thoughts about that organization.
Which one?
About the Flyers. I think Valerie, I think she's doing a good job. I think she is great. I think she's awesome from the business side. It's really hard to focus on kind of driving the business forward at that highest executive level. And then kind of fixing the culture, like if you've got this mandate by Comcast and they become very accustomed to hitting revenue targets that they've often let the culture suffer as a result of hitting these like financial targets by Comcast. And that is like that's the biggest difference of working in a company like that is controlled by this huge conglomerate at this point. This like corporate entity that doesn't have an identity versus working for Harris Blitzer run Sixers or Devils. Those are run much more like a family friendly organization, Phillies, Eagles, which is why people stay so long there. Now that's indicative of like a cutthroat corporate environment, in my opinion. People are like, I hate this, but a lot of those people don't leave, which is the problem. Those folks should probably, they don't need to be there, they dislike it that much, but there's gonna be those complainers everywhere. Just tune it out. But that's the coolest thing about working from home, by the way. I don't have that anymore. If I don't have to answer. I don't have to answer the Slack call from this person who is constantly just complaining. Like I had that at my last company. It's just like, what are you gonna complain about? But yeah, it's fun. The whole sport world is awesome. I think tickets is awesome. I think the software is awesome. Sponsorships. And then the agency, I work with a lot of agencies like a Wasserman of the world. I think it's like a great organization to join on to if you want to go into, or even like a Learfield or a Legends. Those are two really well-run organizations. And you could literally spend your entire career working at a Learfield or a Legends, or inspire the way that they're purchased, like the way that they purchase other entities. You can traverse around the country if you want to do that and see different places, or you can kind of land right here at St. Joe's and kind of run the ticketing and then work your way up and be the general manager of the organization, or even the athletic director. I don't know.
I think it's Van Wagner.
Another really great organization to work for. That's a very sales driven organization and do really well at.
Okay. Well, let's thank Shawn for coming in. Thank you, Shawn, for being here. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
It's awesome.